Welcome back to Ricky Does It. Today, I'm going to be talking about my current project, Ramona and Clay, and the mental health struggles I faced working on it. So this weekend there are two comic conventions happening, one nearby and the other I exhibited at in the past as an independent creator. Each one bums me out whenever they come around, because I never have anything to show as an artist, and this year they're both happening at the same time. But, to my surprise, I'm actually not as upset about it as I have been in past years. So I wanted to talk about that. Back in 2004, 20 years ago now, I started self-publishing a comic that I eventually collected into a mini graphic novel. In 2007, I took that book to the Space Convention in Ohio, since I heard it was good for indie creators. I submitted my book for their yearly competition, and the following year it was one of 4 finalists for the Howard E. Day Prize. I didn't win, but a lot of people started coming up to me, telling me they loved the book, and inviting me out to dinner and other gatherings happening that night. I was definitely not used to this kind of positive attention, and it broke me. I ended up going back to my hotel room and just crying the rest of the night. I spent most of the next day outside smoking instead of manning my table, and ended up just leaving early without telling a soul. So yeah, after that I struggled on and off with creating, because I felt, what's the use of trying to do something with my art if I can't even go to a tiny convention in Ohio and deal with positive attention? And that's the kicker, because I would have never guessed this was an issue. All I ever wanted was positive attention for my work, but when it actually came, I couldn't handle it. I did have a brief burst of mania around 2012 where I cranked out 5 short stories in a few months, but after that, nothing. For the next 5 years, I had nothing in me. Nothing to create, no stories to tell. I had been a storyteller all my life, and it was so weird for me to feel so empty without the inner world constantly churning. So yeah, at some point, I came to truly believe that I'd never create anything ever again. Then in 2018, I started making some very beneficial changes to my mental health treatment. And man, not only did it help lift my depression, but it also got my brains working again. Stories started cooking and characters started springing to life. My original intention was to create something small, something I could easily do, something I could just get out there and share with the world. But then, being me, it grew. You see, I've never been someone who can do anything simple. That's why it's so easy for me to just shut down and do nothing instead. And boy, do I do a lot of nothing. Anyhow, this simple story about a girl and her robot quickly expanded into 400 pages worth of notes, following 40 years of our hero's life, spanning 22 episodes and 6 distinct eras based on different genres and stylistic inspirations, if that makes any sense. Needless to say, the whole thing kind of started to get away from me, and I began to feel overwhelmed, wondering if I could actually do this thing. But then, to everyone's surprise, at the beginning of 2022, I decided to just do it. So I started putting out my story, 1 page at a time, as a webcomic on various websites. Then sadly, about halfway through the first episode, my mom died. It's crazy because I always thought if my mom died, I would just collapse. But oddly enough, I kept chugging away, each page now preceded by a panel reading for Mom. So in that way, I ended up putting out the first episode of my story, Ramona and Clay. 16 pages told in a children's storybook fashion. Then, I hit a wall. Whether it was grief or just being overwhelmed, or likely a combination of the two, I just kind of lost the drive to keep going with the project. To be honest, getting those 16 pages out was hard. Not that it was too much work. I don't mind putting in the work if I know what I'm doing. But for the most part, I was at a loss for what to do. I've never been good at general layout and page design. I'm crap at backgrounds and settings, and it's very hard for me to visualize characters interacting. So even though it's a very visual story I want to tell, and I do have some artistic talent, it kind of hit me in the face that the actual execution of getting that full vision onto the page was really beyond me. So yeah, after 4 years of cranking out notes and ideas, the well started to dry up. And as the year went on, I started to draw less and less, until 2023, where I only drew once the whole year and didn't take a single note. Then 2024 started, and after another beneficial adjustment to my treatment, the depression started lifting and my head started to clear. So I decided to sit down and have a talk with myself. I said, okay, let's be real. We're never going to have it in us to design and draw 22 stories worth of comic book art. That's just the reality of things. So I asked myself, what can I do? And the answer to that was pretty clear. The part I love most, the part that comes easiest to me, and the part I'm pretty good at is character creation and design. So I figured, okay, I can just take my characters, draw them all straight on, display their costumes, their colors, all the things that make them cool, and put together a kind of catalog of them all. I also figured this would be a good chance to lock down a unified style, since my concept art up to this point had been all over the place. As for the writing side of things, I asked myself, are we really going to sit down and crank out 6 novels worth of writing? And I will say the answer to that wasn't an immediate no. However, the likelihood of that happening wasn't very promising. So again, I asked myself, what can I do? And the answer to that was just telling the story. I've always been a storyteller, even as a little kid, especially as a little kid. And here I've already built the story. I've built the world, I know all the major plot points, and if I sat down with a patient listener, I could tell them the whole thing in about 2 or 3 hours. So I figured, why not write this thing the way I tell the story? Instead of having to design and draw every page in a specific style, or having to belabor over every little scene or epic battle, I could just paint the whole thing in broad strokes, making it more of a series Bible than anything. It would feature my catalog of characters, and even though backgrounds are harder for me, I think I could elbow grease my way through a catalog of settings too, knowing I'd have a definite and achievable goal in mind. So yeah, once I'm done, it's possible I could use this series Bible to then move the project forward, either by myself or involving other artists and writers, though working with other people is a whole other bag of worms for me. So yeah, if putting it together this way is all I do and as far as I get, I think I'd be happy with that and just proud of myself for having done something instead of getting bogged down and having nothing to show for my big ideas. So yeah, like I said, I usually get bummed out whenever these comic conventions roll around. I always feel like I should be showcasing my work. But this year I'm doing fine, and I think it's because I know, as things are, if I keep chugging away, before too long I will have something to show, whether I go to these conventions or not. Here's a slideshow of all my concept art for the project over the past few years. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart just for listening. I also want to thank the patrons who have stuck with me over the past couple years, even though my output has been limited. You don't know how much that means to me. And finally, I want to point out that last night, after I wrote this, I actually sat down and wrote the first entry for what I'm now calling the Essential Ramona and Clay. It's a short entry, but I think it sets a good template for the exact tone and style I want, and that's pretty cool. Thanks for watching.